I'm going to just tell you a story. It's going to be a lot shorter than a normal sermon. And I want you to know that I know this is not a biblical story. So you're aware that I'm aware. But I'm telling it for a biblical reason. I mentioned the last couple of Sundays that a lot of how early Genesis works is that it starts a story and everyone thinks they know where it's going, and then it takes a very strange and radical twist. And I just want to tell a story that does that, to demonstrate what that feels like. So here, as advertised, is a familiar story that you've never heard before. Back in the Middle Ages, in the castle and king and prince and time, there was a cute little family, lived in a clearing in the woods outside of the small city. Father, mother, daughter. Very happy family. The father was a merchant, so he had to be away for sometimes long stretches at a time, but when he came back, he was always very warmly welcomed, and the three of them together, and the two of them together when he was away, it was just a warm, cozy family. And it was all perfect until it wasn't. And the mother got sick, and the mother died. And so now it was the father and the daughter only in this house in a clearing in the woods. And they were grieving. And the father thought, I have to go away. I'm a merchant. It's my work. I do not want to leave my daughter alone with no guidance. There needs to be another parent in the house to guide her from her sort of late childhood into her adulthood. And so the father, even though he was grieving, remarried for the sake of his daughter. He married a woman who already had 2 daughters. They became a blended family. And when all 5 were together, it was okay. But when the father went away on his long trips, the stepmother turned very, very mean. And the 2 stepsisters were very, very mean. And they used to make the girl, who just lost her mother, they used to make her sit nearest the fire, right on the hearth near the fire, on purpose to do her work. It was too hot there. Sparks would pop out from the coals and land on her clothes and burn little holes in her clothes and burn through the clothes sometime and make all sorts of little scar marks all over her skin. Sit near the fire, cinder girl, they used to tell her, because the cinders would pop out and land on her. And sometimes they'd throw her food into the fire. Yours just needs to be cooked a little more. If you want to eat, fetch it out, cinder girl. It was nasty. Eventually, it was announced that there would be a ball in the nearby city, put on by the king. The prince was at an age where he was ready to marry. It was understood that this was a good chance to make a strong impression on that prince. And if the prince chose you, you were set for life. The stepmother and the 2 stepsisters were very keen. Cinder girl, by the way, you think you know this story, right? You've heard this before? We usually say Cinderella, but it's Cinder girl. Cinder girl asked if she could also prepare to go to the ball, and they just laughed. They just laughed at her. They said, first of all, why would a servant, they had now just taken to calling her a servant instead of a fellow family member, why would a servant be allowed in the castle? Second, why would anyone want to dance with you? Look at you. Look at your clothes. They're full of holes. Look at your skin. It's covered in scars. You are Cinder Girl. Your job is to get us ready to go to the ball. Cinder Girl did try to be kind. She tried to honor the memory of her mother. And so she helped the stepmother get ready. She helped the stepsisters get ready. She did a lot of sewing. She did a lot of hair. And off they went. And Cindergirl had been accustomed to living with disappointment, and she did really, in her heart, wish them a good evening. But that did not stop her from being sad that she couldn't go. And again, you know what happens next. A fairy godmother shows up, and through all sorts of miraculous interventions, Cindergirl can go to the ball. There are transportation arrangements made for her. She is given a new dress. She looks down at her skin, and the scars are gone. Her hair is miraculously done, as well, if not better, than she did the hair for her stepsisters and stepmother. And so off she goes. And she walks into the ball already in progress, and every head turns for a couple of reasons. She is a strikingly beautiful person as she walks into that room, but also no one knows who this is. It was the mystery, if I can quote that last song, it was the mystery as much as anything that drew everyone's eye, including the prince's. And he danced with her. And there was something just beautiful and kind about this person. And no one knew who she was. Rumors were spreading throughout the ball. She must be royalty from far away. Look how she carries herself. She must be royalty. And then people said, she cannot be royalty. No one knows about this ball outside of our kingdom. Who is she? The prince danced with her every possible opportunity. His father said, you really do need to spread things around, son. So he danced with some other people, but his heart wasn't in it. And as you know, the transportation arrangements had an expiration time. And so as the expiration time neared, Cindergirl realized, I'd better get going. And she had to run off just as the prince was trying to talk to her and find out who she was. And she left in a hurry, so fast that she left behind one of her glass slippers. So the ball is over. The king and the prince talk about it. The prince says, I really only care to know that mystery woman. And the king said, fine, what's her name? Let's get to know her. I don't know her name. Where does she live then? I don't know. What do you know? I know she left behind this glass slipper. All right, we'll find her that way. And so a search is organized. They go house to house in the city. Nobody's foot fits this glass slipper. They head out into the wooded area near the city, and they come pretty quickly to Cindergirl's house. One of the stepsisters tries to put her foot in the glass slipper. Everyone understands that if your foot fits, you're going to marry the prince. According to some versions of the Cindergirl story, one of the stepsisters resorts to some pretty aggressive plastic surgery, but it doesn't work. The stepmother is so selfish, she thinks, maybe I can marry the prince. She tries. Doesn't work. And the prince, who is the one really running the search, asks, is there no other young woman in this household? As he always does. Oh, well, there's our servant. She's upstairs. Everyone tries. No, you... All right. Cindergirl comes down the stairs. Cindergirl approaches the glass slipper. Cindergirl knows her foot is going to fit. And Cindergirl deliberately distorts her foot so that when she tries to put on the glass slipper, it doesn't fit. The stepmother says, I told you, Your Majesty, look at her. How could she possibly be someone you'd like to marry? She's covered in scars, her holes are full of clothes, she's nothing but a servant. Here's why. Here's why Cindergirl deliberately scrunched her foot and refused to put it in the glass slipper. she thought to herself, as she walked down the stairs and as she approached the glass slipper and she saw the prince, she recognized him, he didn't recognize her. And she realized, this man doesn't know me. This man is looking for that beautiful woman to put on his shelf as a decoration. This man is looking for someone who makes him look better. I'm not willing to be someone's decoration. I'm not willing to be a trophy on a shelf. If I'm going to marry anyone, it's going to be because that person knows me as I am. And right now, here's what that means. Clothes with holes in them, skin covered in scars. That's me. But as the prince and the people in his group that were doing the search went out to the carriage, she followed. And she said, Your Majesty, I understand that now your search has to head out into the countryside, and I know the countryside very, very well. I'd be happy to join your party and help you in your search. The prince looked at this tattered, scar-covered servant girl and thought, it can't cost too much to feed one extra mouth. For the next couple of months, we could use the help. Thank you, and she joined the party. So over the next several weeks, something happened that often happens when you are a small group traveling far from home and you are become your own little insulated community and there's really nothing else. Barriers start to break down. Normally, a prince would never have a long conversation with a servant. It wouldn't be considered proper. But it was just a small group, and she was such a help that they started to talk. They started to talk more and more. They started to get to know each other, started to understand each other's sense of humor. And several weeks into the search, again, nobody's foot was fitting, house to house, all through the countryside, the prince started to think, this servant girl is kind of an amazing person. She's intelligent, she's funny, she's kind. I'm never bored talking with her. Every conversation I feel like we could just have so many more. Cinder Girl was thinking, this guy's not the rich male oaf I thought he was. He's intelligent. He's funny. He's kind. And he does care about more than just appearance. Those were their thoughts, but their actions were simply house to house, having everyone try on the slipper. And eventually, inevitably, they came to the final house. In this final house, there were 3 eligible young women. They came down the stairs. The first tried to on the glass slipper, and the glass slipper was too big. The next one tried to put on the glass slipper, and the glass slipper was too small. The third one approached the shoe. And the prince was really full of mixed feelings. And Cinder Girl had no idea what was going to happen. And the third woman approached the shoe and she tried to put it on. Everyone there knew this was the last young woman in the kingdom to try. And it did not fit. The prince thanked them for their time. He picked up the shoe. Everyone who was with him, including Cinder Girl, gathered things up and they went out to the carriage. Everyone got inside the carriage until just the prince and Cinder Girl were left outside, standing next to the carriage, just looking at each other. And the prince said, I have a confession to make. I am glad no one's foot fit this slipper. And Cinder Girl said, I too have a confession to make. And he said, How how can that be? She said, give me the slipper. Okay, that's, happily ever after. But why? Because they actually knew each other. Now that's happy ever after. Think back to what it felt like to hear that story. At the beginning, I never had to tell you what story it was. You just knew. Because that story form is in our blood. It's in the air. We just know it. Sure, I said at one point Cinderella, but at that point you're all like, oh, really? You knew. And think back to how it felt when the story was going as it should, and you listened politely. Thank you. But then the story did not go as it should. Did you feel how you tuned in a bit more? Because you know what's supposed to happen, and it didn't. It went wrong. And it was in how it went wrong that the story makes its point. The point is, don't allow yourself to be somebody's decoration. The point is, don't ally yourself for life with someone who doesn't actually know you as you really are. Look for someone who's intelligent and kind and funny and someone with whom you can talk and talk and talk. That was the point of the story. But how did that point get made? By leading you to think it was one story and then telling you a different one. And it woke you up. I'm saying all that, obviously, because this is how early Genesis so often works. And I just wanted you to kind of go through that emotional life cycle. For the ancient Israelites, oh, here comes the creation story. We know what to expect. What? Here comes the flood story. We know what to expect. What? Here comes the story about building a city. What? This is what happens. And not only in early Genesis. Pamela's about to guide us into communion. I'd like you to think about the disciples at that Last Supper. They thought it was a Passover meal. And at the end, what? As Jesus transformed it into something else. God is full of surprises. We think we know where it's going. And it's always better than that. Amen.